I've had a request from a lovely subscriber called Jane Thomas for a butterfly. So here's a very quick, simple way to create a butterfly design out of wire and beads. So this one is made out of 0.8 or 20 gauge copper wire, and I've used seed beads to decorate it. They've been wired in with 0.4 of a millimeter, and I use that to put into wire it onto a plant stick, put it in with flowers or greenery. You can also make brooches or pendants or decorations, anything you want out of this shape. So to make anything symmetrical, I always draw half of it on a piece of paper, or folded piece rather, so I can open it up and then see the symmetrical shape. So that's basically how I do anything if it was symmetrical. So this gives you an idea of how I work. So I'm going to cut, I'm actually using 1.5 millimeter aluminium wire, just so that it's easy for you to see. And I'm bending it in half. I've got about 22 inches for this size, but you can make this any size you want, and you can use different wires, so don't feel you have to use this aluminium. So I've bent it in half, doubled it up, and the wires are running completely parallel. So now I'm going to start at the base of the butterfly. So I start off at the doubled end, and I'm bending the wire into a sort of hook shape. Then I'm using my fingers to create that first base wing. But of course you could use any molding tool, such as bail making pliers or a pen or something like that. Then I'm bringing the wire around to make the second top wing, the big wing. And here I've got my bail makers just to make those rounded edges. But if you haven't got a bail maker plier, you can always use a pen or a pencil. Then I'm just doing a little bit of wiggling because I like a bit of detail on the wing, and then bringing it back around for the top of the wing, and then I'm bringing the whole lot together and then bending it back up. So that will be the antennae. So you see, that's how I would create the butterfly shape or frame. I'm just going to trim off so that they're both the same size or length, and then I open it up to get the symmetry of the shape or frame. Right, so once you've got that, you need to bind it together. I'm going to use 0.4 millimeter silver plated copper, and I'm going to take the center of a length, put that at the top, and really there is no sort of right way of doing this. It's just that you need to hold the center of the frame together so that it doesn't start moving around and misshaping. So I'm just wrapping from top to bottom, and then I'm going to wire around the middle and use each of these ends to bind across and around to hold the whole shape in place. So don't feel there's any sort of technique to this at all. I'm literally just going round and round, keeping it as flat as I can so that it's not too bulky, using both the ends to hold and secure the whole piece together. And then you just cut off any excess if you have any, or use it all up. So making anything symmetrical, this is the technique I would use. And of course you can make the shape of the butterfly very different to this. I've made it simple so that you can see the shaping can be done with your fingers rather than, you know, fancy frilly bits. So here we have it. I've bound up the middle area, that's the body, and I'm just going to make sure there's no spiky ends, make sure I haven't misshaped it too much. And now I just need to hammer. It compacts and compresses all those wires at the center. Just gently hammer it down to make it sort of tight and solid. Now we've got the antennae to work on, so we're just going to make a circle at the end of the wire on each side, and then we can create lovely big open spirals that curl down to touch the top of the wing. You can make these as frilly or as little as you want. I mean, you might find this is, I'm going for something quite spirally because I'm trying to make it quite decorative. Now we need to hammer the outside of the frame to work harden it, because it's soft aluminium and this will give it strength. So I've hammered all round. I'm just finishing off now, and that spreads it, but it also makes it lovely and solid and firm, and the frame is not going to misshape. So there's your basic framework ready to do what you want with it. So you can put little seed beads, wire into it. You can wire in wire scrolls and things, you know, sort of spirals, but I'll show you something quite simple. I'm going to cut 2 pieces of my 0.5 aluminium again. You could do this in a totally different colour. You could do this with a thinner wire. This is just me showing you quick and easy. So I'm just straightening them out, and then I'm going to use one going into the area of the body just for the top wing. So I'm putting the wire, the center of the wire length in, and bringing the 2 ends out on either side so that those 2 ends sit at the center of the top wings. Make sure that they're both sitting at the front of the piece. And now I can create a spiral with the ends that will sit inside the frame. So if I go to the end, make a little hook, start by creating a little tight spiral, then opening up the spiral to make it more of a scroll or swirl, and then keep scrolling it or swirling it so that it comes to sit within that space. And you just want to make sure that that spiral touches 2 sides of the wing so that you can bind it in and it doesn't move around. So obviously you want to do that to the other side again. So again, make a little hook, squeeze that together like a head pin, grip that and make a little tight spiral to start with, because I'm going to glue something onto that to create a bit more bling, a bit more of a wow factor, a bit of colour. And now I'm scrolling that open spiral so that it comes into that top wing. So there we have it. I'll just keep going until, the wonderful thing about making a spiral is you can, you know, keep scrolling it until it's the size that you want. So there you've got the top wing, and you can spend more time than me. I'm just doing this fast to give you the idea of a technique that you can work on. So we've done it on the top wings. Now we can do that on the other base wings as well. And you can also, I've done the scrolls coming down, but you can make them come up. If you look at the previous one I made, I did them the other way around and it looks completely different. So the second one is exactly the same. You take the center of that length and wrap it around once around the body, bring the 2 ends to the front, and squash it down to make sure it's sitting as flat as you can. You might have to, you know, I've got quite bulky wire. If you're using thinner wires, you won't find this problem. I've got quite bulky wires. Check the ends are roughly the same length, and then do the same thing again. So you want a little sort of tiny circle or head pin, make a little bit of a tight spiral, and then go and open it up like a big swirly tendril until it sits within. So this is very instant, but as I say, if you like beading, you can make the most beautiful designs. Or also you could radiate wires coming from the center on 0.4 and add beads to them. You could make little S scrolls and wire those in different colored wires. There's just masses of variations that you can do with this. So once you know that framework, you know, the rest is, you know, up to you. So the next thing is just making sure it's not going to misshape, and I would use 0.4 then, little segments of it, to wire in the areas that touch the frame. So you're just doing a little bit of binding. It's a bit like stitching, it's a bit like needlework really, just a few little stitches to make sure that it's connected to the frame and it can't sort of move around and misshape. You don't have to do a lot of binding, just try and keep it as neat as possible, because obviously you're going to see all the workings. So, you know, wrap it round, then flatten it with your flat nose pliers or chain nose pliers, and make sure the ends are not protruding, make sure they're cut so they sit on the wire frame, the wire base. So that's roughly what you're going to do with anywhere you want to. You could wire where the antennae is onto the frame, you can wire the side there into that area. You can also do it once just at that base, so to connect everything and make it secure. You can see how I've done it here and here in these areas. So that gives you an idea of filling in. Then you could use flat back crystals or anything that you've got sort of to hand. You know, just little flat backs are perfect, that you can glue onto those, the middle of those spiral areas, and give it a bit of sparkle, especially if it's, you know, a decoration for a plant stick, or well, even for a brooch. Or you might wire it into a hair fascinator, something like that. The other thing I do is I try to hide that middle area, the body area, which is a little bit messy. I use, this is 0.8 of a millimeter, so that's 20 gauge wire, silver plated copper. I'm using this thinner gauge to wrap around, because if I use the bigger one, it's too bulky. And I'm going to make a little circle. I've hooked it in, made a little circle. I think you can just see it there. It's gone around. And then I'm going to make a spiral by swirling or continuing to swirl the wire around that first little circle I made. And that's going to give you a little spiral detail to cover that binding and workings on the body. Again, you could use a different coloured wire for this. And then once I'm happy with the size of it, I'm going a little bit bigger just to hide some of those wires there around the middle. The bit at the back, I'm not going to cut off. I'm going to use that to make another spiral that goes at the back of the butterfly. The other thing that's great to use these, I mean, you could use these butterflies for cards. I often make butterflies for card making, so birthday cards or, you know, get well cards or whatever it is. So they're really lovely motifs to put onto cards. So that's the back. I've used the back of the wire, made little. If you were putting on a card, I wouldn't have made that little spiral at the back. I would have actually pushed that through a bit of card, sellotaped it at the back, and then glued that onto the greeting card, and that would have been, you know, the way of fixing it onto a card base. So I'm continuing with the wrapping around the end of the body, just to give it a little bit a better finish. And it might be a little bit too long here, so I'm just going to trim a little bit off, make a spiral. I always make a spiral, don't I? But I love spirals. I think they're so decorative, and really that's what wire does best. It really is great for spiraling. So I'm going to bring that and position that right at the tip to finish it off. So that's how I cover up, you know, all that working on the body. And obviously I would finish off with the bindings, but I just wanted to show you that. And you can just give that a little tap with the hammer. That gives it a sort of a unified, and it sort of solidifies it to the base and makes it stronger. So there you have it. The rest is just doing the little bits of binding and gluing the little flat backs to the piece. And you can see here how I've curved it a little bit as well. You can shape it a little bit more if you want to give it a finish, or you can, as I say, put the beads in. But I've got another idea, just this is a little extra, if you're interested, to put a gemstone at the center. So I've created a spiral that is the size of my gemstone. I've put a little bit of super glue on, and I'm gluing that to that spiral. I've got to be careful because I don't want to glue my fingers. I don't want to glue my fingers to the piece because I'm working on it too quickly. So here we are. It's now less tacky, so I can work on it. And I'm bringing the wire around the stone to create a sort of fake setting. You don't need to go too far. It just gives this illusion of a frame or a setting. I'm cutting off from the spool, but I'm leaving a tiny tail. See, that's what it looks like from the back. And I'm just going to create a swirl with that extended length. Just curl it, curl it, curl it until it sits on the top of your gemstone. You don't have to do this. You can literally just cut it off and leave the gemstone exposed. This is just a you know, design feature if you wanted it. So once you're happy with how that looks, you can glue that to the that center spiral. I'm getting glue everywhere. This is not good. I shouldn't rush these things, really. So there you go. That's what it will look like. We'll glue that to the center, and I think that looks quite striking, especially for a pendant or a brooch. So there you have it. You've got so many different styles that you could do out of this one framework, and you can scale it up and scale it down. You can wire it onto things. You can just go mad with this idea. So I wish you happy wire working. and I hope you enjoy the project. Thank you for asking for this particular project, Jane, and I hope you enjoy making it.